Blood was everywhere. On the walls, on the floor, even on the ceiling. It was smeared in thick, dark streaks like someone had been dragged across the room, fighting until their last breath. The smell was heavy, like rust mixed with something rotten. In the middle of the mess stood a single chair tipped over, one leg broken, and beneath it, a dark pool so wide it almost touched the door. Detective Mark Holloway froze when his flashlight beam caught something glimmering beneath the bloodstains. It wasn't just a mess, it was writing. Words scratched into the wood of the floor, carved so deeply that they tore through the polish. He bent closer, his chest tight. The message read, "I am still here." Mark's hand shook. Whoever wrote it, whoever bled here, hadn't just been killed. They wanted to be found. But found by who? And why those words? He leaned in, his face inches from the floor, when suddenly a noise echoed from the hallway behind him. It wasn't footsteps. It was a dragging sound, slow, heavy, like something being pulled across the ground. Mark whipped his light toward the sound, his throat dry. Nothing. Just an empty hallway that seemed to stretch forever. Still, the dragging continued, closer and closer, until it stopped right outside the doorway. He gripped his gun, sweat dripping down his neck, and then, silence. The only sound left was his own heart pounding in his ears. He took a slow breath, raised his weapon, and stepped toward the door, but before he could, the lights in the entire house flickered and went out. Cliffhanger intro ends here. 2 weeks earlier, the house on Willow Creek didn't look like a crime scene. Back then, it was just another forgotten building at the edge of town. A tall, weather-beaten farmhouse with broken shutters and a front porch that leaned too far to the left. Kids in the neighborhood called it the cursed house. No one mowed the grass anymore, and no one dared to get close at night. On that warm August evening, 3 teenagers dared each other to go inside. They weren't bad kids, just restless, bored, and looking for a thrill. Sarah Johnson, 17, was the brave one. She had long black hair she tied up in a messy bun, and she liked proving she wasn't scared of anything. Her cousin, Tyler, 16, was the joker. He always had a smile on his face, though that smile often hit his nerves. Then there was Jamie, the quiet one. At 15, she often followed along just to avoid being left behind. They stood at the gate, staring at the house. "Bet you can't last 10 minutes inside," Tyler said, grinning as he nudged Sarah. Sarah rolled her eyes. 10 minutes? Please. I'll last an hour. Jamie hugged her arms. Maybe we shouldn't, but Sarah was already walking toward the porch. Scaredy cat, she teased. The old boards creaked under her weight. Tyler followed, laughing, though his laugh was a little too loud, like he was forcing it. Jamie sighed and hurried after them, her sneakers crunching in the tall grass. The door wasn't locked. It swung open with a screech, and dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and mold. The wallpaper peeled in strips, and the floor groaned as they stepped inside. For a while, nothing happened. Just empty rooms filled with broken furniture, old newspapers, and spider webs. They joked, laughed nervously, and tried to spook each other. Sarah even filmed some of it on her phone, pretending they were ghost hunters. But then they found the basement door that was half hidden behind a fallen shelf, the wood darker than the rest, as if someone had tried to cover it up. The handle was cold to the touch. "Bet you won't go down there," Tyler whispered. Sarah smirked. "Watch me." The stairs creaked as she went down, her flash light beam bouncing across the walls. Tyler and Jamie followed, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, the basement stretched out into shadows. And there, against the far wall, they saw it, dark stains on the concrete floor. Thick. Dried. Spattered across the wall in arcs. "Is that paint?" Jamie whispered, though she knew it wasn't. Sarah crouched down, her light shining over the stains. The pattern was too real, too sharp. "No," she said softly. "That's blood." Tyler swallowed hard, his grin gone. "From what?" They didn't get a chance to answer, because at that moment, something shifted in the corner of the room. A scraping sound, like nails on cement. They spun their lights toward it, but nothing was there. Just shadows stacked upon shadows, then came the smell. Metallic. Sickly sweet. The same smell that Detective Holloway would encounter weeks later. Jamie tugged Sarah's arm. "We have to go. Now." But before Sarah could respond, her light flicked across something on the wall. Scratches. Dozens of them, deep into the concrete. Words. She leaned closer, her lips trembling as she read them. "Help me. Don't let him." The last word was smeared, lost in a streak of dried brown. Tyler cursed under his breath, backing toward the stairs. "Nope. Nope. I'm done." And that's when they heard it. A sound so sharp it froze them in place. A single knock. From inside the basement wall. That knock was only the beginning. None of them knew then that the house on Willow Creek wasn't empty at all. And what lay beneath the bloodstains was darker than anything they had ever imagined, because that night, not all of them would make it out, and the next scream that filled the house was so loud, the neighbors 3 streets away swore they heard it. The scream cut through the silence like a blade. It wasn't Sarah, and it wasn't Tyler. It came from Jamie. The sound was raw, torn straight from her chest, echoing off the damp basement walls. She dropped her flashlight, and it rolled across the floor, spinning the beam wildly over the concrete until it landed on the stains again, on the words, on the blood, on something that hadn't been there before. Handprints, fresh, wet, red handprints streaked down the wall just beneath the carved plea for help. The prints were small, almost childlike, and they glistened in the shaky light as though someone had pressed them there only seconds earlier. Tyler grabbed Sarah's arm, his voice breaking. "That wasn't here. Sarah, that wasn't here before." "Shut up," Sarah hissed, but her eyes were wide, her bravado cracked. She turned toward the wall where the knock had come from, holding her light steady. Her hands shook, but she forced herself closer. The basement seemed to breathe. The damp air grew colder, pressing in on them, carrying with it the faintest sound, like whispering, muffled and low. Sarah's beam swept across the wall. Nothing moved. Nothing except the faint drip of water from a rusted pipe overhead. "Jamie, get the light." Sarah barked, but Jamie stood frozen, her hands over her mouth, staring at the bloody prints. Her chest rose and fell in fast, shallow bursts. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Tyler let go of Sarah and grabbed Jamie's dropped flashlight. "Fine. Here." He pointed the beam at the wall, though his own hands trembled so badly the light jittered. That's when the second knock came. This one was louder. Sharper. As though fists, angry, desperate, were pounding from the other side. The wall shuddered with each strike, dust falling from the cracks. Tyler cursed under his breath, stumbling back. "Sarah," he whispered. "We shouldn't be here. We shouldn't." The pounding stopped. Silence fell heavy over them. And then, slowly, something else started. Scraping that it came from inside the wall, long and slow, like nails dragging against concrete. The sound crawled through the room, burrowing into their bones. Sarah's face was pale now. She swallowed hard and lowered her voice. "Okay. We're leaving. Right now. Don't run. Just go." They backed toward the stairs, flashlights pointed at the wall as if turning away would be a mistake. Each step felt heavier, as though the shadows themselves were reaching for their ankles, but halfway up, the stair beneath Sarah's foot snapped. She let out a yelp as her leg dropped through the rotten wood. Tyler lunged, grabbing her arm before she could fall further. Her flashlight clattered against the steps, rolling down into the basement. Its beam spun in dizzy circles until it landed on something in the far corner. Not stains. Not scratches. A shape, hunched. Still. Watching them, the light flickered once, then died, plunging the basement into blackness. The morning after, Detective Mark Holloway sat in his car outside the farmhouse. He hadn't been inside yet, not officially. But the call from dispatch still rang in his ears. Neighbors reported screams. Kids went in. Only 2 came out. He rubbed his eyes and lit a cigarette, though he'd promised his ex-wife he'd quit. His hands shook as he inhaled. Cases like this always did that to him. Not just the crime, but the place itself. There were houses that felt empty, abandoned, harmless. And then there were houses like this, houses that seemed to breathe. Houses that held on to things long after they should have been gone. That he flicked his ash into the wind and opened the car door. It was time to see for himself what waited beneath the bloodstains. The door slammed shut behind them with a violent bang, shaking the rotten farmhouse walls. The teenagers screamed as their flashlight beams whipped wildly across the room. The sound wasn't just a draft. Something had forced the door closed. The youngest girl, Lily, clutched her brother's sleeve, her tiny fingers digging into his skin. It wasn't the wind, she whispered, her voice trembling. Her flashlight beam shook in her hand, scattering light across the peeling wallpaper and the cobwebbed ceiling. "Stay calm," Jake said, though his voice cracked with fear. He stepped toward the door and grabbed the rusted knob. It wouldn't turn. He yanked harder, his knuckles whitening, but the door was jammed tight. Behind them, the hallway groaned, the floorboards creaking as if someone, or something, was shifting its weight just out of sight. Maya, the oldest of the three, raised her light toward the hallway. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her breath loud in the silence. "Jake, don't move," she said softly. The beam revealed nothing but a long stretch of cracked wooden floor, peeling wallpaper, and shadows clinging to the corners like living things. But then, just for an instant, they all saw it, something darting across the far end of the hall. Something low, quick, and wrong. Lily whimpered. Jake backed away from the door, sweat glistening on his forehead. "We need to find another way out," he said. They turned, their lights cutting into the stale darkness, and slowly moved toward the staircase. Every step they took sent a groan through the wood, as if the house was warning them to leave, but leaving wasn't an option anymore. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Maya froze. She was staring at the wall where the words had been scratched earlier. "Help me. Don't let him." The blood was no longer dry. It was wet again, glistening in their light. And new handprints had appeared. Lily dropped her flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, landing on the far side of the basement. And that's when they saw it. The wall where the handprints ended was bulging. Not cracked plaster or loose wood, something was pressing out from the inside, as if the wall itself was alive and trying to breathe. Jake grabbed his sister's hand, pulling her toward the staircase. "Go, go, go." They scrambled up the steps, Maya pushing from behind. But halfway up, the stairs gave a violent shudder. One of the planks snapped under Maya's weight, her leg plunging through with a splintering crunch. She screamed in pain, the sound echoed through the entire farmhouse, bouncing off the walls like a call. A call that something answered. From below, the wall let out a hollow boom, as though a massive fist had pounded against it from the other side. Dust rained from the ceiling. Another knock followed. Then another. Louder. Faster. Jake hauled Maya's arm, trying to free her from the broken step. "Come on." His voice was breaking. "Don't stop." Lily screamed, pointing back toward the basement floor. Her beam of light was flickering wildly, but it caught enough detail. The bulging wall had begun to crack, and through the split came pale, human-like fingers, bloody, twitching, clawing for release. Maya sobbed, her leg bleeding where the wood had cut into her skin. "It's coming out," she gasped. Jake tore her free from the step, dragging her upward. The three of them stumbled into the first-floor hallway, slamming the door shut behind them. They leaned against it, panting, their faces pale and wet with sweat. The basement door rattled. Once. Twice. Then it went still. The silence was worse. For a few long minutes, they didn't move. The farmhouse seemed to listen with them, its walls breathing slow and heavy. Finally, Maya limped to the side, her face tweaked. In pain. She sat on the floor, clutching her leg. Jake looked at the wound. It wasn't deep, but it wouldn't stop bleeding. He tore a strip of his shirt and tied it around her calf, his hands shaking. "We can't stay here," he whispered. "No kidding," Maya hissed, her eyes locked on the door. "It knows we're here now." From somewhere upstairs, a loud crash echoed, as if a heavy piece of furniture had been thrown across a room. Dust drifted from the ceiling, raining down on their heads. They all froze again. Lily pressed her hands over her ears, rocking slightly. "I want to go home," she whispered. Jake's heart was pounding so hard it hurt. He turned his flashlight up the staircase. The beam barely reached the landing. Beyond it, shadows writhed. He thought he saw movement, something tall, leaning forward, as if waiting for them. "We need to get out a window," Jake said, his voice firm though his body trembled. "Forget the doors. We'll break a window." Maya nodded. She tried to stand but nearly collapsed from the pain. Jake caught her, draping her arm around his shoulder. Together, they shuffled toward the living room. The farmhouse groaned with every step, as though mocking their attempts. The wallpaper seemed to ripple in their flashlight beams, and the smell of rot grew stronger, thicker, almost choking. When they reached the living room, they found the old windows nailed shut. Boards covered them from the inside, rusted nails hammered deep into the wood. Jake swore under his breath and slammed his fist against the boards. "Come on." That's when Lily gasped, pointing toward the far corner of the room. There, crouched in the shadows, was a figure that it wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. But it was there. Its outline was human, but the head was tilted at an unnatural angle, too far to the side, like its neck had been broken. The teenagers froze, their flashlights trembling. Then the figure's head slowly straightened with a sickening crack, and it smiled.